Hey guys, David here, coming to you with another video. This is my long promised video on the Divine Council, which is a fascinating doctrine in my opinion. You don't ever hear about this in church. That's why I've been wanting to make a video on it for a long time. I hope this blesses you and that you will, that your eyes will be open to a new perspective of the supernatural worldview. I also highly recommend Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, through whom I first learned about this idea. And yeah, let's get into it. And I would like to start off today by reading from a scripture passage, Psalm 82, verse 1. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Here we are introduced to the term divine council. What does this mean? Well, allow me to briefly explain the concept we're going to be dealing with. So imagine or think of the kings of old, how they had an assembly of advisors surrounding them, helping them make decisions and carrying out the king's will. And the Bible indicates that God has something similar, a council of advisors that help him carry out his will. Let's return to Psalm 82 and read it in full. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die, and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. So, this psalm not only introduces us to the concept of the divine council, it actually reveals a lot about them. In verse 2, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? This is God speaking to his council members, reprimanding them for judging people and nations unfairly and unjustly, being wicked rulers, so to speak. Well, you might ask, when did God ever place these council members in an authority to judge others? Well, we're going to find out by reading another scripture passage. I'd like to address the debate that is surrounding Psalm 82, namely that some theologians do not believe the term gods here, Elohim, referring to divine sons of God. Rather, they believe it to be referring to Israelite judges or princely rulers of other nations. And I'll tell you why I don't think that interpretation makes any sense, and why I prefer the divine sons interpretation, or angelic or spiritual. Namely, because of verses 6 and 7. When God says, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince. So if these gods, if these sons of God, sons of the Most High, were ordinary men to begin with, like you and me, then the following verse wouldn't make any sense, where it says, nevertheless, like men you shall die. Right? This verse is contrasting the divine and the human. God is telling his divine sons, yes, you are divine, you are my sons, but you shall die like ordinary men. That makes far more sense than saying that Yes, you are men, and you shall die like men. That doesn't make any sense, right? Therefore, I prefer the divine interpretation of the term sons of God, because it's also worthy to point out that the term sons of God or sons of the Most High, Bnei Elohim or Bnei Elah, is mostly used of divine beings or angelic beings elsewhere in the Old Testament, namely in Genesis 6, where the flood happens, and in Job 1, in Job 2, and in Job 38. All right, so the next scripture passage we're going to look at is in 1 Kings 22. And here we get to glean what's going on behind the curtain of the spiritual world and how God interacts with his council members. All right, let's go there now. And the context of this passage is this. God has declared it is time for the evil king Ahab of the northern kingdom of Israel to die, essentially. Furthermore, the evil king Ahab of the northern kingdom comes to the king of the southern kingdom, Jehoshaphat, asking him for help in conquering a region that was overtaken by Syria, but was part of Israel in the past. And Jehoshaphat says, that sounds like a good idea, but I would like assurance that Yahweh is on our side. So Ahab calls 400 of his prophets, which all prophesy well for him because they're in his pocket, or because of another reason, which we're going to find out soon. And then Jehoshaphat says, I would like to hear from one more prophet, Micaiah. And then Ahab says, oh, I don't like that guy. He always prophesies ill for me. And here we continue reading. Chapter 19. And Micaiah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go out, and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. The Lord has declared disaster for you. So here we get to see what is actually going on in the spiritual realm. God is surrounded by his advisors, by his divine council members. And he lets them decide how to best deal with a situation. And the situation here is Ahab needs to die because he's evil, because he's corrupt, right? God judges evil. And he lets his council members, his free will agents, come up with a plan, and God can either shut it down or accept it. Now you might ask, why would God need help from anybody? And the obvious answer is he doesn't. God is omniscient, he is all-powerful, he doesn't need help from anybody. But he chooses to work out his will this way. He graciously integrates both his divine sons and his human sons into his plan, into his will for the earth. So, we've looked at Psalm 82, which introduces us to the concept of the divine council. We've looked at 1 Kings 22, which further illustrates what is going on behind the curtain of the spiritual realm. And now let's look at Deuteronomy 32, which shows us how and when God placed his divine sons in the position of authority to judge other nations and peoples. This passage that I'm going to read from is part of the Song of Moses, which is a great poetic song by Moses, praising God, praising Yahweh for his deliverance out of Egypt. And Moses is also summarizing the history of the world here partially, which we will read now. Chapter 32, verse 8 to 9. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. So allow me to exposit this passage. When did God ever disinherit the nations? Well, there's really only one place, and that is in Genesis 11 at the Tower of Babel. Remember when the people all came together wanting to build a tower up to heaven, essentially wanting to become gods themselves, rejecting the authority of Yahweh? And Yahweh came down and dispersed the people all over the world. He essentially pushed the reset button. He said, you don't want me to be your God? Fine, I'll start over. I'll disperse you over the world and start over. And then the following chapter, chapter 12, is the call of Abraham. God said, I'll make a new nation for myself with this one man, Abraham. And Abraham is of course the father of Israel and the father of the faithful and the father of many nations. And this second verse, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. So it seems that when God disinherited the nations, he placed over them his divine sons, his council members, as a placeholder God for him. Presumably these council members were supposed to delegate worship to Yahweh, but something went wrong, as we find out in Psalm 82. They became corrupt, wanting worship for themselves, maybe, and as a result judged unfairly, showing partiality to the wicked, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a textual variant here, namely this one, according to the number of the sons of God. The Masoretic text actually reads here according to the number of the sons of Israel. But I'll tell you why sons of God is correct here, namely because we have found earlier manuscripts than the Masoretic text in the Dead Sea Scrolls, revealing to us what was most likely the original reading, that of sons of God, not sons of Israel. Furthermore, the reading sons of Israel doesn't make any sense here, because Israel wasn't even a nation yet at the time of the Tower of Babel, right? Abraham wasn't even born yet. That happens in chapter 12. Therefore, sons of God is the correct reading here. So here we find out that God disinherited the nations and placed other gods, lesser gods, his divine sons, over these new nations. And it's important to note that this is a common concept among ancient Israelites. There's actually evidence of this idea found in the pseudepigrapha in Second Temple literature, namely in the Book of Jubilees. We can read chapter 15, verses 31 to 32. And he sanctified it. This is God speaking. No, this is the author speaking about what God did to the nations and to Israel. And he sanctified it and gathered it from amongst all the children of men. For there are many nations and many peoples, and all are his. And over all hath he placed spirits in authority to lead them astray from him. But over Israel he did not appoint any angel or spirit, for he alone is their ruler. And he will preserve them and require them at the hand of his angels and his spirits, and at the hand of all his powers, in order that he may preserve them and bless them, and that they may be his and he may be theirs from henceforth forever. That sounds pretty similar to what we just read in Deuteronomy 32, right? So in conclusion, I think we can pretty confidently say that God has a divine council and that he makes use of them in blessing and judging nations and people, and that some of these council members were placed over other nations and went astray, essentially apostatized, and decided to rebel against God. So let's address some of the implications that this concept, the divine council, brings about. Well, if this sounds controversial to you, you're not alone, because this concept essentially applies that there are multiple gods besides the one true God, Yahweh, right? Does the Bible teach pantheism? I thought the Jews were monotheists, right? Well, rest assured, the Bible does not teach pantheism, despite what some liberal scholars like to claim. No, the Jews absolutely believed in the superiority and ultimate authority of Yahweh, their one true God. However, whether or not they were monotheists is in question. Scholars have actually hypothesized that the ancient Israelite was more likely a henotheist or a monolatrist rather than a monotheist. And these henotheism and monolateralism are two very complicated sounding words, but they essentially mean believing in one God but not denying the existence of others. And that's most likely what the ancient Israelite believed if we look at what the Bible teaches. Remember when Moses compared Yahweh to the other gods? When Moses asks rhetorically in Exodus 15, "Who among the gods is like you, Yahweh?" Is Moses comparing Yahweh to non-existent beings? Or look at the first commandment. God says, "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." What other gods if other gods don't exist, right? So, are there multiple gods in the Bible? Yes and no. The word Elohim, the Hebrew word for God or gods, contrary to our English word God, did not have a bunch of attributes associated with it, like omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. No, the ancient Israelite used the word more commonly, not only to refer to Yahweh, but also to other spiritual beings of the heavenly realm, like the sons of God, and also the deceased Samuel. The spirit of Samuel is referred to as an Elohim in 1 Samuel 28. So you can think of it this way. There's one true God, Yahweh, but there are many Elohim. And Elohim is simply a term used to describe a spiritual being, an immaterial being, a being of the supernatural realm. Alright? So there's one true God, but many Elohim. The Bible does not teach pantheism. The Bible teaches monotheism, and these other lesser gods are always subservient to the one true God, Yahweh. Alright? So, we've looked at passages which tell us about the divine council. We've looked at Deuteronomy 32, teaching us that other nations are under the control of hostile gods to Yahweh, hostile fallen angels, we can call them. And we find evidence of this cosmic struggle between Yahweh and his angels and Satan and his angels, or the fallen angels. We find evidence of this cosmic war going on in the book of Daniel. Let me just find it. Where's Daniel located again? Pretty far back, right? Okay, Daniel chapter 10. And the context of these few verses that I'm about to read is an unidentified divine being or angel is coming to Daniel to reveal to him what is about to happen and what has happened on his way to Daniel, because this angel was held up by evil supernatural forces. Chapter 10, verse 13. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. And another verse, verse 20. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. So here we have this angel talking about princes of other nations, the prince of Greece and the prince of Persia. And prince here is a term used to describe a supernatural being, not humans. And it further reinforces the idea to us that other nations are under the control of these hostile fallen angels or princes. And we learn that they fight against each other. There's a cosmic war going on, basically, right? That should concern us as believers of God and loyal followers of Yahweh. We should ask ourselves, how do we help Yahweh win this cosmic war? And the answer to that is, since we live in New Testament times and God has fully revealed himself to us in the form of Jesus Christ, we do so nowadays by preaching the gospel, by evangelizing individual peoples. We don't do so by sword and shield or by gun. We don't fight battles that way. No, we slowly reclaim the lost nations of earth, one person at a time. And thereby we establish a bastion of believers, of holy ground in hostile nations to God, thereby slowly reclaiming the world for God. Make sense? Alright, that's one application of this teaching, that it should encourage us to preach the gospel more often. And another one concerns eschatology, our future destiny in God's kingdom, because Paul teaches us in 1 Corinthians 6, he says, do you not know that you are to judge angels? Implying that we are going to be in a position higher than even the divine sons of God in our future state. It teaches us that we are going to displace the fallen council members and judge them for their wicked deeds. Isn't that a wonderful thought? Doesn't that encourage you that we are going to be elevated to such a high position as to even judge angels? Doesn't that encourage you that God cares about us so much that he has chosen us over his divine sons? So, in conclusion, God has a divine counsel which he makes use of in judging and blessing nations and people. He graciously works out his will through his free will agents. He includes both his divine sons and his human sons in carrying out his will. He is that gracious with us. He doesn't need help from anybody, but he chooses to work out things this way. Some of these divine council members became corrupt and fell, most likely wanting worship for themselves, became arrogant and proud. And God is in the process of reclaiming that which was lost. These hostile nations, hostile to Yahweh. And today that is done by preaching the gospel, winning one person at a time, thereby slowly reclaiming the world for God, the lost nations for God. And our future destiny will include becoming members of the divine council, displacing those who have fallen and judging them. Our position will be even higher than that of the angels, so to speak. That is an encouraging thought, isn't it? Alright guys, thank you for watching. That's pretty much it. I hope this blesses you and opens your eyes. It certainly did mine. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.